Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, finally, at last. It has felt like Friday for about a week now. Friday, June 2nd, 2023. It hasn't always felt like that particular Friday, but it's a Friday. It certainly has felt that way for some time now, so I'm glad for us to be here at the weekend, which still means something in America. All right, anyway, lots to gather up, catch up on, etc. It is Friday. There's a jobs report out. It's positive. Republicans are upset because people are getting work and keeping work, and that's bad news for them because they want people to think that they're the only ones that can produce jobs. So, whatever, they're out there attacking it and making light of it, and I've seen people collecting the Fox News commentary on it and enjoying it. I think it was Aaron Rupar out there who's saying it's his favorite Friday tradition is watching, what's her name, Maria Bartiromo, or how, I don't think I ever get her name corrected without it in front of me at the time when I say it, but then I don't even get that correct either. But I guess that's her job, is to come up with reasons why positive job reports are bad for America, because that's what they need them to be. So, interesting and weird, to say the least. And, let's see. I happened to also see someone commenting. It was Waldo Jaquith out there commenting away on the jobs report and just noting this, which is also true. I think I've observed pretty much the same thing. And I don't really observe the job reports all that closely, but he says for 2.5 years, we've had the same headline every month. Hiring rates exceed expectations. And then he says, if I were a labor economist and I underestimated hiring rates every month for 39 consecutive months, and I guess I'll take his word for it that that's how long this has been going on, well, I'd either A, quit my job, or B, simply add 30% to my estimate each month. It's amazing that a group of experts can be wrong so consistently and that media outlets continue to rely on their forecasts. And maybe that should be the real story here. Maybe that would be an interesting story. It's interesting enough for me to read it. Of course, I did wonder, could you really afford to leave a job like that, where for 39 months in a row you could be completely wrong and nobody cares? They just say, come on back next month and estimate it again. And if you wanted to be closer to the truth, you wanted to be closer to right, you really could just say, oh, I'll do my regular estimates and then just add 30%. And that'll be fine. And everyone will accept that as a job estimate. And why would you leave such a job? I mean, there's no downside. Presumably, you're getting paid enough to live, right? So I'm not sure. And but of course, the comment back, and Waldo did answer, their understanding is that it would be awfully difficult to get a new job, what with the low hiring rate this month. Right. So what's another reason why you wouldn't want to leave that job? One, you think you won't get another one. But two, this one is so easy and no one cares whether you do a good job. It seems to me that most labor economists in that position would probably not leave their job. And I hear you need a behavioral economist, I guess, to tell you why that would be the case. So, okay, well, maybe if the behavioral economists talk to the labor economists, we can sort this whole thing out. All right, let's see, other ideas for the day, or things to cover for the day. The Senate did its work more or less as expected and passed the debt ceiling deal, I believe, unchanged from what came through the House. No interest, really, in prolonging things. I guess, let's see. Here I have the front page at Daily Kos open just to see what's going on and what people are covering. And Joan, as usual, has covered that news. Senate passes debt ceiling deal, averts default. That's about all you can really say about the thing. It was effective at doing that. That's for sure. There's an update here, by the way, from later on in the evening. The Senate, the deal just passed the Senate. Okay, I guess she was saying that they anticipate the passage. And then when it finally passed, She updated at almost 11 o'clock Eastern time yesterday. They passed the deal 63-36 after a long day of wrangling over amendments, as well as agreements from leadership about commitments to pass all of the appropriations bills and a mess of other stuff. But 11 amendments were quickly, by Senate standards, dispatched, none of them passing, which was a foregone conclusion. They couldn't change the bill, of course, because then there wouldn't be enough time for it to go back to the House before we hit the default X date, as they sometimes call it, today being June 2nd. And what were we waiting on? June 5th as default day these days. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had, I guess really, set Monday, June 5th as the absolute last day the government can keep paying its bills without action from Congress to lift the debt ceiling. With the House set to act by the end of the day Wednesday, the Senate could be pushed to its procedural limits to get the job done in time. Senate Republican nihilists so far seem pretty determined to push that limit, even though their efforts to derail will be futile. So I guess this comes from the version of the story that existed prior to the results. And in case you were wondering who was going to be screwing around with what but didn't bother to watch the proceedings, Joan will tell you pretty much what went on and what was expected. There was McConnell had done his bit, and he wholeheartedly endorsed the deal. That doesn't mean he's going to crack the whip on his nihilists, though, even if he could, and I guess he didn't. Though their counterpart Freedom Caucus in the House has caved to reality, there's mischief to be made in the Senate, where they have the power to drag things out until the last painful minute. A few Republicans have already made it clear, or I guess by that point had made it clear, that they're not going to bow to the inevitable and let the bill pass with unanimous consent. Instead, they're going to try to demand that the Senate waste hours and hours of, quote, debate time, while the chamber sits empty, just to make the point that they do not approve. Among them, of course, Mike Lee, who had promised to do just that earlier this week, saying he was going to use every procedural tool at his disposal to gum it up. It's time to go back to the drawing board, or even better, to go back to what the House already passed. But he means their old first attempt at forcing through even more draconian budget cuts earlier. But they've passed something else, so use that instead, really. That he was referring to the original Freedom Caucus plan that passed the House back in April, which of course isn't going to happen, and he knows it. Knowledge, however, isn't enough to dissuade him from being a pain in the ass. Speaking of pains, Rand Paul. Okay, let's see what he was up to, because always Rand Paul, he's always a pain in the ass. Interestingly enough, though, the Kentucky senator doesn't want to drag this out for hours and hours. He just wants an amendment that says everybody should be doing this bill the impossible way he wants to do it, with a balanced budget in 5 years. He knows it won't even get a majority of Republican votes, which should put him on the outs with the Freedom Caucus types in the House, but it won't. I don't think there are 50 votes. I think about half the Republican caucus will support mine. He told reporters earlier this week, no Democrats will support it, but the American people need to know that's where we are. Sure, Rand, do it for the people, says Joan. All right, let's see. Any other items I want to pull out of here? Let's see. Rick Scott is out there. Of course, it says he can't support the bill because McConnell is supporting it. He tweeted his opposition with a demand that McConnell capitulate to him. That's not going to happen. South Carolina's Lindsey Graham says there's not enough defense spending in the bill, even though it's one of two budget items that won't be frozen and is getting an increase. So he's going to use all powers available to get a vote on an amendment to increase the Pentagon's budget. There's a whole contingent of Republicans who know that they won't have to support the deal for it to pass, and they also know that offering amendments is purely performative. None of those amendments will pass, and they didn't, because if they do, then the bill has to go back to the House to be voted on again. That's far too dangerous a proposition when it comes to the full faith and credit of the United States Treasury and letting the maniacs have another stab at it. What it's going to come down to is just how obnoxious they feel like being to the rest of their colleagues and how much they want to enjoy a work-free weekend. Paul gave that game away. He and his colleagues will demand amendments that they know won't pass and will get votes on them from leadership because no one wants to hang around longer than they have to. They won't do it out of generosity, but they may want to do it out of wanting to leave town for the weekend, Paul said. And right he was, and none of those things passed, and I guess they get to leave for the weekend. So thanks for updating us on the dynamics there, Joan. And, well, time marches on. Let's see, other things to add. Let's see, the AP story plucked from the wires as the details of the jobs report. U.S. employers added a strong 339,000 jobs in May as labor market stays durable. I like that headline. Stay durable, my friends. That's what I usually tell people. All right, let me bookmark Jones' piece here so I can include it for you. Although probably the least useful in terms of the links, because I assume almost everybody listening to the show has a pretty good idea where to find Joan McCarter's Daily Kos front page story about this. But hey, maybe we're welcoming people in through the podcast door who just don't know anything about Daily Kos and just want to hear the news. Okay, let's see. Other things to catch up on. I'm going to turn it over to Pocket. There's plenty of interesting and fun stuff. So yesterday, we left off with a discussion, just the briefest note on one of the more important stories of the day, that there are, we now know about the existence of a recording of Trump confessing to more crime, essentially. A very interesting one, and having to do with, it's not a new crime. It's just one that is, what we have on tape is evidence of his guilt, further evidence of his guilt in the documents case, the Pervalago document theft espionage case. And what's happening here? Let's read through the articles because it's really rather remarkable what he's done. I had the Guardian piece yesterday. I had a Business Insider piece about it. Today I also can add something from the Washington Post by way of analysis. But did we get the chance to read the Guardian's piece yesterday? So I think the long story short version of all of this stuff is that, we'll read the article and remind everybody what was going on. Trump regretted not declassifying retained military document in recording is the rather dry way that the Guardian headlines Hugo Lowell's piece here. And the story is this. Federal prosecutors obtained audio recording of a summer 2021 meeting where Trump suggested he should have declassified a military document about Iran that he admitted retaining, according to people familiar with the criminal investigation into his retention of national security papers. Simple enough so far. Step 2 here. The recording is made at Bedminster Golf Club in July of 2021. Why is he there? He leaves Pervalago because it's too hot and sweaty and sticky there, which, sounds perfect for Pervalago, but he goes to New Jersey where it's slightly cooler and plays golf there all summer. So, he's there. Now, why is he blabbing and why is there a recording device involved? The answer is in this paragraph. He is meeting with people who are helping Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff, write a book. Why does anybody need to help Mark Meadows write a book? If he was smart enough to be White House chief of staff, he could probably write the book himself. Well, okay, fine. That doesn't happen in celebrity political culture. You hire a ghostwriter so you don't have to do any of the work yourself, but you still have to meet with the person and blab with them and try to tell them that you did cool things, and they record that and then go back to their computer and type out your book. So, okay, that's what's happening here. Who's helping Mark Meadows write the book? It is Margot Martin, who is, I can't tell whether his aide, Margot Martin. Is that Meadows' aide, Margot Martin, former Trump aide? I don't know. I don't know what her job description was. And of course, if she was an aide to Meadows while he was chief of staff, she kind of counts as a Trump aide anyway. So it doesn't matter. It was someone working inside Trump world when he was in the White House. Margot is now helping Meadows write his book. And so she's taping the remarks and they're meeting with President Trump, which I guess is kind of like, tell me some cool stories about awesome stuff that you and Mark Meadows did that we can include in the book. So a perfectly normal meeting to be having, I think. I mean, except for the fact that he should never have been president and whatever. Anyway, for several minutes, in the audio recording, the sources said, Trump talks about how he cannot discuss the document, the one he's in trouble for admitting he has, because he no longer possesses the sweeping power of the president to declassify now that he is out of office, but he suggests that he should have done so when he was still in the White House. So, in other words, he's talking about a document that is classified, that remains classified, that even for all of his stomping and his feet and protesting, that some or all or most of the documents that he retained really were declassified because he imagined them to be declassified while he was still president. It's interesting. Why would he even say that I forgot to imagine that this one was declassified? Why didn't he just lie and say that it was declassified? I don't know. But what's he even talking about? How does it come up? And okay, I think this story actually does clear some of that up. Here's what's going on. The previously unreported suggestion that he should have declassified the document, and this is why it's important, this really should have come later, presents a potentially perilous moment for Trump as it indicates that he knew he had retained material that was sensitive to national security, as well as the limitations about discussing it. So he knows he shouldn't have the document. He knows he shouldn't be discussing it with people at all. But, he can't help it. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there's a document that's so secret and tells you, right. Okay. So that's what he's doing. The exact nature of the document Trump was referring to in the recording is unclear, though Trump's lawyers believe a document classified at the secret level, which referenced military action concerning Iran, had been returned to the National Archives months later, according to a person briefed on the matter. Prosecutors in the office of Special Counsel Jack Smith appear to have obtained this recording, around March, as the criminal investigation targeting Trump intensified and numerous Trump aides were subpoenaed to testify before grand jury, hearing evidence in the case in Washington. The tape was played to multiple witnesses, including Margot Martin, when she testified in mid-March after having her laptop and phones imaged by prosecutors, the sources said. We did read this. The first time the Trump lawyers learned about the tape was after Martin testified, one of the sources said. In his book titled A Chief's Chief, Meadows recounts how Trump once recalled. This is the story. Okay. So, in the book, Meadows says, there was this time when Trump recalled a 4-page report produced by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, that contained his plan to attack Iran, though it is unclear if that was the same meeting attended by his writers. But the July 2021 meeting came shortly after Trump was incensed about news reports that Milley had urged him not to attack Iran in the final weeks of his presidency. So I guess there's a story in July 2021 that Milley says, you know how crazy Donald Trump was? He's so crazy that in the closing days of the administration, I had to convince him not to try to attack Iran, I guess either to then say, well, we're at war and we shouldn't transition to presidency when we're in the middle of a war, even though we would have done that anyway. And, all sorts of reasons why that couldn't have, shouldn't have, whatever, worked. But basically the story was Milley was saying he was that kind of a crazy a-hole. He was actually thinking about attacking Iran as a way of, I don't know what, diverting attention from the fact that he lost or trying to stay in office, whatever it is, or just some last exercise of arbitrary exercise of power to show somebody something. So Trump is essentially saying, it makes me mad that Milley is out there telling people how crazy I am. So the counterman to that is, I was once given a memo by Milley that outlined plans to attack Iran. And I guess he's thinking that the story here is it's not Donald Trump who's so crazy that he wants to attack Iran. It's Mark Milley who's so crazy that he wants to attack Iran. And that's why he gave me a 4-page memo outlining plans to attack Iran. Of course, Milley would probably answer, well, I gave you a 4-page outline of plans to attack Iran for numerous reasons, one of which is that as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I can tell you that the military spends time planning attacks on Iran, not because they want to, I mean, they may also want to attack Iran, but that's not the reason that they prepare the reports. That would be the reason that they exhibit a certain enthusiasm. There we go. They have enthusiasm for writing the report. That might be one of the reasons that they're excited while they're writing it, but they're being asked to write it because that's just standard military preparation. All these guys sitting around here, use the time that we're not having wars to plan for what if we had to have a war with this one, that one, or the other one, so that if the time comes, if an emergency arises and now you find yourself at war, you don't do the planning then, you already have a plan ready to go. And you'll occasionally share those plans with the president for various reasons. Now, one of the reasons that you might find yourself sharing such a plan with the president is if the president is in fact crazy, wants to attack Iran, and asks, what are our plans? If I decide to attack Iran, send me a memo on what we have already planned. Because if we don't have anything, we really should work something out. Or if it doesn't meet my approval, I will pretend I know something about the military and order you to change the plans. Now, so it's almost assuredly underneath all of this is Trump indicating to the military that he wants to know what's going on by way of planning attacks on Iran. Otherwise, they probably just wouldn't send him the information. But he wants to hide that part and make the story, oh, Mark Milley wanted to attack Iran. He's the unstable one. Now, so Trump figured he could pin all of this on Milley and say, Milley doesn't know what he's talking about. He's lying. He's telling people that I'm the one who's crazy and wanted to attack Iran when really it was him. And I could prove it. I could show you this thing he sent me that said, here's how we should attack Iran. It doesn't have any context of why did he write such a report and why did he send it to me. That would all put it probably all on Trump, which is what Milley was telling people. But Trump figures, well, here's 4 pages worth of what I believe to be incriminating evidence against Milley. But then he says, but I can't show it to you, which is a very Trumpian kind of a thing, but I can't show it to you because it's classified. But if I could, it would prove that I'm right about Mark Milley. It would not, of course, prove that you're right about Mark Milley. And if you showed it to them, you would be, guilty of espionage. And also, why do you have it? Now we come back to the real issue here. He's not president of the United States anymore. He should not have this in his possession, but he's saying he does. So it's a kind of a 2-3-fold problem here. Any number of reasons why he's doing something wrong in discussing it, in retaining the document, and in lying about the provenance of the document in the first place. Trump believed that this document outlining the report to attack Iran would undercut Milley's reported assertions, though the report was actually written earlier in the Trump administration when Joseph Dunford was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so that wouldn't even help in undermining Milley. That, according to a person familiar. Who is this person familiar with the document? Trump spokesperson said something, blah, 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 partisan witch hunt, yada, yada. So, that's where we are with this story. Was there anything different in the Business Insider version of things? Probably not. I don't think so. So let's go over to the analysis. Philip Bump writing in the Washington Post on why a recording of Trump discussing classified documents would be important. Well, you could probably guess, but in case you can't, this is Philip's guess at why it's important. It was mid to late July in 2021, and former President Donald Trump had decamped from his newly adopted Mar-a-Lago home for his summertime residence at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Probably should have gone to this. He'd been out of office for about a year and a half, or rather about half a year, and was playing host to researchers working on the autobiography, and that's in scare quotes, of his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Trump's aide, Margot Martin, there we are, was there recording the conversation, as she typically did, just in case Trump wanted to challenge something his interviewers claimed. So that's another interesting angle on things, by the way. The perfectly plausible explanation was, I'm writing a book, and you guys are telling stories, and I want to record the story and then go back and work it out as a narrative for the book. But this adds the angle of very frequently you will then do that and then go and write the book, and then something will come out and Trump doesn't like the way it looks in print and will say it's not true. That's not the way it happened at all. And then you could produce the audio recording saying, here's you telling me that this is how it happened. I don't know if we've seen things unfold in exactly that manner yet, but it's wise to record every conversation with Trump, really. All right. That by itself is telling, Bump says, and that's what I mean here. Trump has the habit of preserving documentary evidence just in case he needed to use it for leverage. And in the conversation with Meadows and his team, he reportedly demonstrated how that worked. At some point before the discussion, the New Yorker had run a story examining how General Mark A. Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, had sought to ensure Trump wouldn't launch a war during his contentious last days in office. Trump, incensed, reportedly suggested to researchers that he had a document that undercut the Milley narrative. Trump brought up the document, which he says came from Milley. It didn't, apparently. CNN's Caitlin Polentz, Paula Reed, and Caitlin Collins, all the Caitlins, I guess, reported on Wednesday. Trump told those in the room that if he could show it to people, it would undermine what Milley was saying. That was the whole point here, is he wanted to knock the legs out from underneath the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I don't know whether he was still chairman at that point, but it doesn't matter. Trump told those in the room that if he could show it to them, it would undermine what Milley was saying, the sources said. One source says Trump refers to the document as if it's in front of him. And this conversation was reportedly captured in the recording made by Martin, now in the hands of special counsel Jack Smith, who is investigating various matters involving Trump. And apparently on tape, he says, if I could show you this document, et cetera, and then you hear it sort of wrinkle. He's waving a piece of paper around, according to the recording. Is that it? Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let's jump back to what Philip Bump was telling us in his analysis of this recording and what it tells us and what we read into it here from the Washington Post. This is the part where we jumped out here. The recording is now in the hands of Jack Smith. And it says here that several sources say that the recording captures the sound of paper rustling as if Trump was waving the document around, CNN's report continues, though it is not clear if it was the actual Iran document. Could it be that he was waving a piece of paper around or several pieces of paper around and claiming that this is the top secret, not top secret, but secret document that he was talking about, that if I could show this to you, this would prove, I have here in my hand proof that Milley is lying or he's telling stories, whatever. Maybe it wasn't it, but maybe it was. Maybe it was, because he had it in his possession, right? A central aspect of the recording is contained in that if he could show it, explained more directly by The Guardian's Hugo Lowell. We already read this part. Now, this helps, I think, give some context to what Lowell was saying. I think the two articles together are a little bit more clear. This is where Lowell says, Trump talks about how he cannot discuss the document because he no longer possesses the sweeping presidential power to declassify now out of office. But he suggests that he should have done so when he was still in the White House. Such a recording may be legally inculpatory, certainly, but it also significantly damages Trump's political case. To the first point, it's useful to remember the timeline. By May of 2021, the National Archives and Records Administration had contacted Trump's attorneys to request the return of presidential records in accordance with the Presidential Records Act. In a May 6, 2021 email, NARA's general counsel, Gary M. Stern, gently pressed Trump's team to return any additional materials taken by Trump. It is absolutely necessary that we obtain and account for all original presidential records, Stern wrote. That kicked off months of back and forth between Trump's team and NARA before more than a dozen boxes of materials were returned to D.C. in January of 2022. Boxes that the Washington Post has reported were compiled with Trump's oversight. That some of the material was classified triggered the initial FBI probe into Trump's handling of documents. A May 2021 email, of course, precedes a mid-July conversation by more than 2 months. It's hard to believe that by that point, Trump was unaware of the federal government's position. It may be the case, though, that the overlapping question of possession of classified material had not yet been elevated. That brings us, though, to Trump's political defense. To date, his defense of his retention of documents has taken two tracks. First, that everyone does it, a standard and inaccurate bit of Trumpian whataboutism. Second, that he had the right to declassify anything he wanted, and in fact that everything in his possession was declassified. Before we go on to the rest of the story, a note about something else I saw on social media today, and just today. Apparently he's been doing this for quite a while and I've missed it, but where we talk about his whataboutism. Everyone does it, standard and inaccurate bit of Trumpian whataboutism. Of course, the fact that it turns out that Biden had in one of his post-vice presidency offices some documents that were also classified. He loves to point to that and say, see, everyone does do it. And I'm sure it happens a lot. But of course, we've also illustrated that the big difference is, when the National Archives asks for the documents back, other presidents and vice presidents give the documents back, whereas you fight to retain them and try to declassify them and hand them out to people. And no one is really sure why you think you're allowed to do that. But you're not. You only imagine that you are. Anyway, that's one big difference. But he's been, I guess he's been shopping this explanation, this excuse around for some time, but I guess it just happened again, that he says the office, as it turns out, the office where, one of the offices where Biden had papers stored, among which were some classified documents, the office was located in the Chinatown area of D.C., which, is only in the most technical sense a Chinatown. It's a Chinatown because they say it's a Chinatown, and the Chinese population of that area has long since left D.C. Chinatown is a block or two of some Chinese restaurants, but also mixed in with every other kind of American chain, retail and restaurant and everything else. And there's a decorative arch that marks it out as Chinatown. The city is kind of desperate to retain some character of a Chinatown because it's a tourist draw, but there's really no Chinatown to speak of there anymore. But of course, Donald Trump heard that this office was in the Chinatown district. And so he's apparently telling Sean Hannity, not only did Biden also retain some documents, but he kept them in Chinatown, which, as you know, is full of people who are Chinese. And then he begins spinning the story. No, hardly anybody even speaks English there, he says. And as you know, they're very pro-China in Chinatown. There are, of course, living in American Chinatowns because they've left China because they're not particularly pro-China, or they just, are more pro-American than they are pro-China. Anyway, but never mind all of that. His view of this, or the story he's trying to spin is, well, I kept the documents, but I kept them in good old USA, America, per-Valago, whereas Biden brought them to Chinatown, which is just practically the same thing as defecting to the Chinese Communist Party and moving to Beijing. Right, sure. Anyway, it doesn't really matter very much. I was kind of astonished to hear, one, that he had come up with that, and two, that apparently he's been saying that for like a year or however long it's been since they discovered that there were documents in the Biden offices, and I am just hearing about it now, which is terrific. I love it. One of the best things going in my life. Anyway, so there's the other second part that Philip Bump was telling us about, that part about how Trump says, I had the right to declassify anything I wanted to, and in fact, that everything in his possession was declassified. Now, to some extent, Bump correctly notes, this is irrelevant, given that Trump was served with a subpoena for any documents with classification markings last year. Not give us all your classified documents, but give us all documents that have markings that say they're classified, even if they're declassified. They were anticipating this defense. So, that's what the subpoena asked for, and he still didn't comply. With his attorneys then providing some, but not all, documents fitting that description, the search of Mar-a-Lago turned up more. But a recording in which Trump claims that he wishes he could show a classified document, and then is waving one around, to researchers to undercut Milley indicates, 1, that he knew it was still classified, 2, that he had it in his possession, and potentially 3, that he was in the habit of using the documents he took from the White House as rhetorical chits. The former president's attorney, Jim Trusty, appeared on CNN on Wednesday night, where he was asked about the reported recording. Among his claims were that Trump was president even when he arrived at Mar-a-Lago on January 20th, 2021. Apparently important, since it suggests that he had the right, at least between his 11 a.m. landing and noon, when Joe Biden became president, to be in possession of or to declassify documents. Trusty also excoriated the Justice Department and FBI for engaging in a leak campaign, an attempt to shift the conversation to Trump's preferred argument that the deep state is simply out to get him. CNN's Abby Phillip, though, asked a pointed question. In April, Trusty was a signatory to a letter from Trump's team to Congress in an obvious effort to leverage Trump-friendly legislators to perhaps derail the probe. In it, Phillip pointed out, Trump's attorneys claimed that staffers simply swept a bunch of documents into boxes that were then transferred, sight unseen, to Mar-a-Lago, and that's how this whole thing happened. It seems this tape indicates at least Trump knew specifically that he had this specific document, Phillips pointed out. In other words, Trump knew some of what was in those boxes. Trusty deflected. There are a slew of other questions that emerge from this reported recording. For example, it suggests that Trump might have had the Milley document at Bedminster, right? Not at per-Valago. If he did, then either Trump brought the documents back to Florida, where it was turned over to or seized by the federal government, or it remains in his possession, potentially at Bedminster, where last November Trump's attorneys say they oversaw a search for additional classified documents without success. His attorneys were similarly unsuccessful in finding classified documents when searching per-Valago after receiving that subpoena last year, you'll recall. So we don't always believe it when they say, well, we searched and we didn't find anything. Well, then let the FBI do the search. Oh, look, you found something. That's weird. Well, let's use the same process to sort out the papers at Bedminster. But there's been no FBI search at Bedminster, so maybe there really needs to be one. All right, let's see. More importantly, it suggests that Trump used classified documents precisely as security officials had feared. When CNN's Collins asked Trump last month if he'd shown classified documents to anyone, he offered a verbal shrug. How so? I was wondering about that. What's a verbal shrug? You get this answer. Have you ever showed any of these classified documents to anyone? Not really, he said. Not really. The answer we're looking for here is no. Or yes. I mean, you could confess, but no. Not really. That's a yes. Not really. I would have the right to. By the way, they were declassified after. And Collins presses him. What do you mean, not really? Not that I can think of, Trump replied. In the office at Mar-a-Lago, where he received visitors, Trump had a special leather-bound box that contained a number of documents with high-level classification markings. You've no doubt seen the picture of those documents arrayed on the Mar-a-Lago carpet after the FBI seized the box. Yes, we've seen it. Americans and the special counsel are asked to believe that those documents were simply slipped into that box and carried to Trump's office, and that they remained there for well over a year, untouched and unseen by anyone without the proper clearance. But his lawyers somehow overlooked those documents when responding to the subpoena. That seems unlikely, too. That Trump, so eager to have leverage in his various feuds and disputes, never dipped into that box to brandish something that might make a point to someone else about some other fight, like exactly what he happened to try to do with Milley while the recorder was going. Occam's razor would suggest that we accept the obvious, simpler explanation. So, yeah, he seems to have painted himself into a real corner with that one. Not great, you might say, for Donald Trump. Now, let's see. Other things that I think pertain to this story. Also available in Pocket. Something I think I had a couple of weeks, or maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago. There seemed to have been some falling out among the Trump legal teams for the various charges and cases that he was facing at the time. And this piece here from, I guess, is it the latest from Hugo Lowell? Yeah. Also in The Guardian, describes, I guess, the situation as between the lawyers there and some of the dumb things that they did among themselves, including discussing the dumb things they had done at a restaurant where they were overheard by reporters. So let's see what this story is about. Months of distrust inside Trump legal team led to top lawyer's departure. Exclusive, reads the subheader here. 2 Trump lawyers considered a, quote, murder-suicide pact, not a real actual murder-suicide, but to both sacrifice themselves together if necessary, where one would resign if the other was fired. That's what they mean. So what's going on? Trump's legal team for months has weathered deep distrust and interpersonal conflict that could undermine its defense of the former president as the criminal investigation into his handling of classified documents and obstruction of justice at Mar-a-Lago nears its conclusion. The turmoil inside the legal team only exploded into public view when one of the top lawyers, Tim Parlatore, I don't think we know that guy, abruptly resigned 2 weeks ago from the representation, citing irreconcilable differences with Trump's senior advisor and in-house counsel, Boris Epshteyn. Remember that Epstein is still around. But the departure of Parlatore was the culmination of months of simmering tensions that continue to threaten the effectiveness of the legal team at a crucial time as federal prosecutors weigh criminal charges, in part because the interpersonal conflicts remain largely unresolved. It also comes as multiple Trump lawyers are embroiled in numerous criminal investigations targeting the former president. Epstein was recently interviewed by the special counsel, while Parlatore and Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran testified to the grand jury in the classified documents inquiry. The turmoil has revolved around hostility among the lawyers on the legal team who have come to distrust each other, as well as their hostility directed at Epstein, who over what they regard as his oversight of the legal work and gatekeeping direct access to the former president. In one instance, the clashes became so acute that some of the lawyers agreed to a so-called murder-suicide pact where if Parlatore got fired, others would resign in solidarity. And as some of the lawyers tried to exclude Epstein, I don't remember how he goes with Stein or Steen, but Epshteyn, Epstein, they withheld information from co-counsel whom they suspected might brief him. The infighting eventually reached the point at which some of the lawyers started to believe the biggest impediment to defending Trump might just be the distrust and interpersonal conflict, rather than someone like Parlatore deciding to cooperate with prosecutors. In fact, the legal team is said to be confident that Parlatore will not flip on Trump after he told the grand jury hearing evidence in the case last year that Trump gave him free rein to search for any remaining documents at his properties last year, according to a transcript of his testimony, but an eventual attempt to remove Epstein from the case ended in failure, and Epstein remains a trusted member of Trump's inner circle. The months of worsening relations that led to that moment were described to The Guardian by 6 people familiar with the situation. We know how many are those people. We don't know who they are. Anyway, in a statement, a Trump spokesperson said, what do they usually say? This is completely false, rooted in pure fantasy. Real story is the illegal weaponization of the Justice Department, witch hunt, something, all the same thing. The lawyers named in this story either declined to comment or did not respond to calls for comment. Here's how the story unfolds now. The animosity inside the Trump legal team started almost immediately after the FBI seized 101 classified documents from Mar-a-Lago last August, when Trump's lawyers asked a federal judge to appoint a special master to review the materials for any privilege protections. Remember all of that? The legal team at the time was composed of the former federal prosecutors Jim Trusty and Evan Corcoran, whose search for classified documents in response to a subpoena later proved incomplete. The former Florida Solicitor General Chris Kise and the lawyer Lindsay Halligan. Okay. I guess those two are the other side of the legal team. So Lindsay Halligan, Chris Kise, and then Trusty and Corcoran, the former federal prosecutors. The lawyers presented a united front as they argued to the U.S. District Court Judge Aileen Cannon, remember, that she should grant this special master, which she did, a strategic win for Trump that enabled him to delay the criminal investigation and prosecutors' ability to review the documents. But Trusty, who played a leading role in the special master litigation, was already frustrated with how things were going. Trusty's private frame of mind emerged over dinner with Halligan and Corcoran at the 5-star Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, Florida, hours after the special master court hearing. The conversation was overheard by this Guardian reporter, Hugo Lowell himself, who happened to be sitting at the table next to them. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Trusty's main irritation with Epstein, as he recounted, was having to run his legal decisions by him, even though he did not consider him a trial lawyer and objected to how, in his eyes, he gave more priority to Trump's perceived PR problems than to genuine legal problems. He criticized Epstein for trying to troubleshoot those problems before they could reach Trump instead of allowing him to straightforwardly brief the former president himself. The entire situation meant the lawyers were having to play a Game of Thrones nonsense that he found distracting. I'm not sure why he thinks of Game of Thrones from this, but okay. Trusty then discussed legal strategy, suggesting Kise was, quote, too apologetic in opening remarks to the judge and questioned the validity of the FBI warrant for Mar-a-Lago. He also said he had no interest in talking to reporters from the from the publication Lawfare or the New York Times on account of their coverage. All right, typical. Trusty's annoyance with Epstein for inserting himself into legal deliberations came to be shared by Parlatore several weeks later when the Justice Department told the Trump legal team in October that it believed the former president still possessed classified documents. The deliberations over how to respond to the department's accusations split the legal team. Epstein and Kise were not in favor of doing voluntary searches of the Trump properties, while Parlatore and Trusty suggested a more proactive approach that involved new searches. Epstein and Kise for weeks were unconvinced, but Parlatore and Trusty reasoned that if they did find more classified documents, but immediately returned them to the Justice Department, it would make it harder for prosecutors to say that Trump willfully retained classified material. New searches of Trump's properties did take place, though in Parlatore's retelling of the deliberations to CNN last week, Epstein was reluctant to allow a search of Trump's Bedminster golf club because he knew that he actually had the Iran document there, probably. Later, the Trump lawyer Alina Habba was booked on CNN to dispute Parlatore's account. But the episode also precipitated a new distrust among the lawyers themselves, not just with Epstein. When the news about the Justice Department's suspicions were reported, Parlatore and Trusty were surprised to see Kise portrayed as having always sought a cooperative approach with the prosecutors. To Parlatore and Trusty, while Kise ultimately supported further searches, he was hardly the leading voice. And when Kise pulled out of arguing before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit to keep the special master with 24 hours notice, they had him exiled to the civil litigation team. Now, next up, the lawyers stage a Mar-a-Lago intervention. With Kise gone from the team defending Trump in special counsel matters, Parlatore and Trusty's interpersonal conflicts with Epstein reached new levels as they grew increasingly annoyed at what they considered their inability to directly consult Trump without having to go through Epstein. The pair chafed that when they spoke to Trump on the phone, Epstein was typically also on the line. At other times, they sniped that Epstein would give overly rosy outlooks to Trump, and in March traveled to Mar-a-Lago to seek Trump's permission to exclude him, Epstein, from future deliberations. It was not clear whether the issue was actually resolved. Parlatore came away from the meeting content that he no longer needed to speak to Epstein. However, Epstein remained Trump's in-house counsel and the legal team's liaison with the Trump 2024 campaign. Around that time, Parlatore and Trusty also started withholding information from Corcoran because they worried that Corcoran was too close to Epstein and was briefing him behind their backs. That meant, as the special counsel intensified the documents investigation after prosecutors convinced a U.S. appeals court to force Corcoran to turn over his notes to a grand jury, at least two members of the legal team had little to no visibility into what the other two lawyers were doing unless they found out another way. Around that time, Trump advisors and lawyers started to hear murmurs about whether Parlatore and Trusty should continue in their roles. When the pair heard about those inquiries, they resolved that if one of them actually got fired, the other should also resign. The animosity has also been increasing as the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, prepared to charge Trump in the hush money case. And Parlatore insisted to Epstein that the celebrity lawyer, Joe Tacopina, whom he detested, related to a prior case, that's a weird phrasing in there. Let's see if I can sort that out. So, let's see. Parlatore insisted to Epstein that that Tacopina, whom he detested, should not be on the team defending the former president in the documents case. Okay. Epstein, I guess, suggested it was not in his control because Tacopina was recommended by others in Trump's orbit, including Kimberly Guilfoyle, which Parlatore interpreted as a snub. Parlatore also had a misstep when he and Trusty last month urged Congress in a letter to tell the Justice Department to stand down its criminal investigation in the documents matter, laying out a detailed defense that claimed in part that responsibility lay with aides instead of Trump himself. The 10-page letter was sent to Trump, and they believed it had the former president's approval, but Trump was furious days later when he saw that the language in the letter cast doubt on his previous public statements about how White House and classified documents ended up at Mar-a-Lago. Parlatore had also decided against giving Epstein advance warning about the letter, which some on the Trump campaign and other lawyers used as an example of why the legal team needed his supervision. But the proximate cause of Parlatore departure was a row over discussing the letter on CNN. Parlatore had made a point of appearing on the network because he figured the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, was more likely to watch CNN than a conservative network like Newsmax. Exactly who ordered Parlatore's appearance to be canceled remains unclear, though the Trump 2024 campaign later told the lawyers it was because he criticized Tacopina the last time he was on CNN. As the special counsel investigation neared its end, Parlatore told Trump he would be leaving, and that's where we now stand, with even more of his defense team having resigned. And whether anybody else goes, if the murder-suicide pact covers resignations, we're not really sure. Anyway, we need to know all of that as background so that we understand what's happening in the cases. Okay, let's see. One more thing I think that depends or that's linked to investigations, etc. I mentioned to you yesterday that very weird case that weird play that James Comer was pulling from the Oversight Committee. In other words, I don't know whether he directed somebody to do this, but at some point he finds out that an informant at some level tells an FBI agent that he thinks that he has evidence that Biden or someone in his family is involved in an international bribery scheme. The agent fills out a form and files it because that's what agents do. Comer finds out about the form and demands that the form be turned over to him, knowing that the FBI will be reluctant to give it because it comes without any context, like, yeah, somebody said this and we have reason to believe that it's just not true, and that's why we never followed up on it. But as long as they're reluctant to give him the paper, he can say, what are they hiding, and pull that trick. Right? Okay, well, Philip Bump has something to say about this as well, but I can't tell you what it is until after we take a top-of-the-hour break. But don't worry, that one's only 1 minute long. And then we can get into this. And then we can move on to other fun subjects that have been waiting in the wings all of this time. But we can tease a little bit of it anyway. The headline here is James Comer's bribery allegations are out on a very shaky limb. They were pretty shaky when we read about them the other day. We'll see what Philip's got on his mind about this and why he wants to share more with you about it in about a minute from now. Well, let's say a minute and 10 seconds, because first we have to spend a couple of seconds here bringing you up to that musical break. This one. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show. You know where we are. We're here on Netroots Radio, and now time to read more from Philip Bump. I guess it's a Philip Bump show this morning, but I find myself thinking very much along the same lines and get interested whenever he picks up these threads. So what's going on with Comer and his crazy theory here? We don't know much more than we did about a month ago, he begins by saying. Then House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer and Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa, you remember him, sent a letter, I guess a month ago, to FBI Director Christopher Wray demanding the release of a document called an FD 1023. You heard about that the other day. It was yesterday that we read about this, detailing an agent's interview with a source. The particular document they sought described, in their telling, quote, an alleged criminal scheme involving then Vice President Biden and a foreign national relating to the exchange of money for policy decisions. The letter was made public in short order and rapidly picked up by conservative media outlets like Fox News, and then nothing for like a month, right? The FBI did respond to the request for the document, saying that it opposed its release in part because it risked exposing its sources, a standard response, and in part because the allegation is just that, an allegation. The FBI isn't new at this. It certainly understands why Grassley, and particularly Comer, are eager to have it released. An allegation encoded on an FBI form has a perceived weight that an allegation presented in a congressional press release doesn't, even if that perception is unwarranted. So, For a few weeks, Grassley, and particularly Comer, have been agitating for the June 2020 document to come out anyway. We've learned one new detail via Comer's regular Fox News appearances. The allegation reportedly involves the sum of $5 million. Otherwise, it's just Grassley, and particularly Comer, pressing the FBI to release the document and threatening contempt charges against Wray if he doesn't do so. This happens a lot. Former attorney generals like Eric Holder and William Barr were held in contempt of Congress, for example. Alberto Gonzalez before him. But anyway, on Wednesday, there was an incremental development on that front. Wray got on the phone with congressional leaders, including Comer, Grassley, and separately, the Oversight Committee's ranking Democrat, Representative Jamie Raskin. A few hours later, Comer appeared on Sean Hannity's Fox News program to reveal what the conversation had produced. Wray, quote, offered us the opportunity to come look at the document, but he was going to redact it, Comer said. My experience with getting documents from the FBI when they're redacted, it's all black lines. They don't show anything, Comer said. But I'm going to say on this show that we told Director Wray what Senator Grassley told Director Wray. He continued, he and I have already seen the 1023 form. We knew what was in that 1023 form until we told Director Wray that. He never even admitted that the form existed. Now, Philip has this to say. We should note quickly that Comer didn't say what Wray planned to redact. So when he told Hannity that he too would redact part of the document, the source's name, skeptical viewers might have wondered if that was all Wray similarly intended. Skeptical viewers might also have wondered something else. If you already know what the allegation is, why don't you just investigate the allegation? The problem is that there are no skeptical viewers of these programs, right? The logical implication from Grassley and Comer, having seen the document, is that their whistleblower is someone who had access to it, to wit, a current or former employee of the FBI or the government. CNN reported on Wednesday that the documented issue may have been part of a number of files Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani gave the Justice Department in 2020. Whoever the source was, they had a copy of the reporting document for years without more details about it being uncovered. Never mind that the allegation about Biden emerged in June of the year Donald Trump was seeking re-election, seemingly without Barr's Justice Department ever developing a criminal case around it. So it's not a new revelation. The Justice Department had the form and knew about the complaint as early as June of 2020, and the Trump administration had 6 months to push the Justice Department under Barr to develop a criminal case around the accusation and decided not to for some strange reason. But Comer and Grassley have been aware of its contents for a month, and all they appear to have done is pester the FBI about it. Remember, Comer held a news conference in early May during which he alleged that foreign money had at times moved between members of Biden's family. That was the product of months of investigations based on financial documents the Oversight Committee had retained. There was no evidence presented of a $5 million payment to then Vice President Joe Biden or his intermediaries. Perhaps the bank records were too narrow, or perhaps there was no such payment. As eager as Comer has been to make allegations about Biden based on this single-source document, Grassley has been reticent. He appeared on Fox News on Thursday morning, carefully but deliberately stepping back from Comer's claims. We aren't interested in whether or not the accusations against Vice President Biden are accurate or not, Grassley said. Okay. We're responsible for making sure the FBI does its job, and that's what we want to know. So why was there no investigation? I don't know. Trump's DOJ didn't seem interested in launching an investigation. You haven't been interested in investigating anything either, except why we haven't investigated. So I don't know. There seems to be no interest at all in actually doing the investigation, either here among the people who are supposed to investigate things, or there among people who will at least investigate why we didn't investigate. Anyway, Fox News anchor Bill Hemmer asked what the document said, and Grassley just says, "I'm not going to characterize it." How damning is this document to the sitting U.S. president? Hemmer asked a bit later. "I don't know that," Grassley replied, "and that's what we need to." "But you've read it," Hemmer pressed, and he's right. "I read it," Grassley replied. "Let me put it this way. There's accusations in it, but it's not for me to make a judgment about whether these accusations are accurate or not. It's up to my job to make sure the FBI is doing their job." So he won't even say, well, I saw it and it actually alleges some serious criminal wrongdoing. All I know is it alleges something, and I won't go out on a limb saying that we need to spend taxpayer dollars under my control to investigate it. I'm just saying I want to know why the FBI isn't spending taxpayer dollars and being held accountable for their investigation of it. And the answer is because deep state, and because I know that there's nothing there, and it would be a waste of taxpayer dollars for me to investigate nothing. I would like somebody else to investigate nothing, to keep it in the news, and then if they're later criticized for wasting taxpayer money, what do I care? It's the Biden Justice Department you'd be criticizing. That's the play there. Now, it's fair to say, given Comer's television appearances, that Grassley's assertions that we aren't interested in whether the accusations are accurate does not actually encompass both him and his colleague, though in a way it does, since Comer seems eager to amplify them even in the most abstract way without offering evidence they are valid. This brake pumping by Grassley is nonetheless important, and the timing is interesting. Grassley is being cautious in the immediate wake of Wray confirming to Raskin and the Democrats that they too will soon be able to see the accusation, meaning that after a month of Republicans shielding the claims from the opposition, Democrats and eventually the White House will be able to evaluate them and, if possible, offer evidence undermining them. The letter from Comer and Grassley came out May 5th, by which point they'd presumably seen the document. At the very least, they knew what the accusation was. Since then, though, there's no evidence that they did anything to investigate it. From the Oversight Committee, nothing. Instead, they spent a month hammering the FBI in keeping with the political rights and Donald Trump's interest in casting the Bureau as a political opponent. Maybe in another month, we'll know that there's a real accusation that's currently part of a robust FBI probe that threatens the Biden White House. Or perhaps we'll learn that the whole thing was dubious from the outset, and that Grassley, and particularly Comer, had been trying to wring political power out of a dry sponge. And then it ends with this update. On Thursday, FBI Acting Assistant Director Christopher Dunham sent a letter to Comer and Raskin articulating the offer to view the document. Calling the action an extraordinary accommodation, Dunham explained that the document would include limited redactions necessary to protect the identity of the confidential human source. In other words, presumably not much more than what Comer himself endorsed. So, the play continues, and this is really just evidence of how much of a ploy it really is, and how much hay they're trying to make out of this one-page thing. And even Grassley won't go so far as to say it really is very damning. It's just, he's saying it is what it is, and we want to know why the FBI hasn't blown it up into something bigger. I haven't blown it up into something bigger because I know it doesn't support anything bigger. But I wouldn't mind if the Biden FBI blew it up into something bigger, or at least gave Comer the ability to say, we don't know what's going to come of it, but the FBI is investigating, so let's just suppose it's going to blow up into something bigger. It's a interesting play, and very intricate, but very dumb and very straightforwardly without foundation. But we needed to find those things out and have that information available to us. Let's see. a suggestion from Greg about a fun story that might be worth digesting, but perhaps we'll see how far we get in some other materials, and then perhaps that's something Greg might want to discuss with us on Monday. We might as well give him the opportunity to do so. Here's something else entirely, but something worth reading through, and a little bit scary, and it comes from the Bulwark, and I'm going to read it and not Greg. I mean, Greg might also want to discuss it, but I have to get to it first. It's a good weekend piece, something to ponder over the weekend, that helps clarify the crazy, I think. I mean, it doesn't make it less crazy. It just illustrates where the crazy is coming from. Roger Stone is the crazy in particular that I'm talking about. Roger Stone and the key to Trump's evangelical support. Sounds like a polling issue, something Greg might be interested in. Plus, it comes from the Bulwark, but it's not actually a polling issue. But it does talk about where key support is coming from and why. And the answer is crazy, in both instances, from crazy people and for crazy reasons. Following a conversion experience, about Roger Stone we're talking about here, the Trump advisor has found a new audience in a movement of MAGA prophets. Matthew D. Taylor, the author of Dis-Peace. Ready? Okay. It's an interesting one. I think you'll find it intriguing. Like I said, good weekend piece. Trump advisor and Mad Hatter political operative, that's cool, Roger Stone, made a strange declaration at a recent gathering of pastors at the Trump National Doral Resort in Miami, Florida. He claimed that he was the subject of a modern prophecy about a stone that would kill a giant. Like the David and Goliath story. A stone would kill the giant. Well, my name is Stone. They mean me. A stone that would kill a giant, and that he is now, quote, a soldier in the army of the Lord. And everyone loves the army of God. That's Hezbollah, is I think, in Arabic. But anyway, never mind all of that, right? Anyway, he's a soldier in the army of the Lord. And he went on to apocalyptically proclaim that American politics today is, quote, not just a struggle between Republicans and Democrats or between liberals and conservatives. This is a fight between light and dark. This is a struggle between good and evil. This is an epic fight between the godly and the godless, and we dare not lose, because should we lose, America will step off into 1,000 years of darkness. And so what's underlying all of this is the question of, is Roger Stone, is he crazy in a new way? Has he gone wacko evangelical, and does he really believe this stuff? Or has he simply come to understand that there are wacko evangelicals who do believe this stuff, and if I speak their language, they'll be even more unfailingly pro-Trump? Don't know. You have to untangle that for yourself, but here's the information that you can go on. For those who may have intermittently followed Stone's oddball, cynical career at the heart of modern Republican politics, this declaration of piety might sound odd and new, but Stone's rhetoric deflects an identity shift he has undertaken over several years. Though he was raised Catholic, Stone claims he experienced a born-again awakening following a conversion with the evangelist Franklin Graham. Not a conversion, but a conversation. Okay. That too might also have happened, a conversion, but a conversation with Franklin Graham at a January 2020 revival meeting. He's been sharing this story for years now, including in an interview last March with Charisma Magazine, an influential publication among charismatics and Pentecostals. Stone now identifies as a non-denominational Christian. Now, a conversation with Franklin Graham in January of 2020. Anything else crucial going on in January of 2020 that anyone could think of? Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry. I thought that was January 2021. That was crucial too. So a year since having a revelation, and after a conversation with Franklin Graham, he's plotting a coup, and that becomes important later too. All right. As a religion scholar who has not spoken to Roger Stone personally. Who are we talking about here? Matthew D. Taylor, the author of The Peace, is the religion scholar in question, who has not spoken to Roger Stone personally. I will refrain from speculating on the sincerity of his recent conversion and new faith commitments. However, I will observe that he made very similar Manichaean and apocalyptic remarks on January 5th, 2021, at a rally in Washington, D.C., perhaps you've heard of it, to stir up the Trump-supporting crowds for the next day's actions. Indeed, more important than knowing the inner workings of Stone's heart and mind is recognizing the context in which he keeps making these comments, their political function, and the subset of evangelicals that he's addressing through them. All right, now the part about parsing the crowds that could be important for polling later on. Evangelism in America is a big, complicated movement that includes, depending on how you define the category, between 13.6 and 25.4% of the U.S. population. So 13.5 to 25.5%. That's somewhere between 45 and 84 million Americans, with a host of theological, political, and identity currents among them. Much has been written over the past 8 years about the American evangelical attachment to Donald Trump, but a lot of this commentary has missed the central evangelical demographic at the heart of Christian Trumpism. To be clear, evangelicals, particularly white evangelicals, gave major electoral support to Trump in 2016 and 2020. But if you look closely at the Evangelical Advisory Board, that's the inner circle of religious advisors that Trump assembled while in office, and his most loyal Christian proponents who were willing to show up in force on January 6th, a striking pattern emerges. Trump's most ardent Christian advocates are non-denominational charismatic evangelicals, a group sometimes referred to by academics as independent charismatics or independent network charismatics Christians. Charismatic, singular. Okay. And that's a weird name. Independent network. Like, okay, are you independent or do you have a network? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Independent charismatics are evangelical Christians who attend non-denominational churches or, alternatively, who may infrequently or even regularly attend a more typical denominational church, while giving their real spiritual attentions and enthusiasm to online prophecy ministries and preachers. Independent charismatics emphasize a modern, supernaturally driven worldview, where contemporary prophets speak directly for God. Sure. Why not? Miracles are everyday experiences. Menacing demonic forces must be pushed back through prayer, and immersive, ecstatic worship experiences bolster Christian believers' confidence that they are at the center of God's work in the world. These believers are country cousins to the more denominationally aligned Pentecostal evangelicals, though the lack of denominational oversight and the freewheeling nature of the independent charismatic sector leaves them more vulnerable to radicalization. That is problematic, right? You don't have a doctrine that's driving you like the way, say, the Southern Baptists do. You're free to prophesy whatever you want, and the more outrageous and weird, the more clicks you're going to get, and the more followers you're going to have, and the more money you're going to raise. So what do you think's going to happen? Sociologist Paul, Djupe, maybe? D-J-U-P-E, Djupe, I don't know, has conducted surveys in the last couple of years that yielded two important findings concerning the beliefs of independent charismatics. Belief in modern-day prophecy, and particularly belief in prophecies about Donald Trump, was both strongly correlated with belief in Trump's claims of election fraud and a major accelerant for extreme political views, including an openness to supporting violence or lawbreaking in the pursuit of political goals. This should not surprise anyone too much if you truly believe that God is intervening directly in American politics and anointing presidents. Then democracy and the will of the people must logically be secondary and subordinate to the will of God. That goes a long way to explaining why, how Trump could quite obviously lose, but they convince themselves that he either actually won or should have won, and it is either demonic forces trying to blind people with illusions such that they come to the belief that Joe Biden won, or something along those lines. I have argued, our writer says, in an audio documentary series, that independent charismatic prophecies, theologies, and leadership networks were at the molten core of Christian mobilization and participation in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. And I'm now reminded of all the work that Peter Manso has done in documenting the religious participation and undertones and overtones to January 6th, which have largely been ignored. The prosecutions have been of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who, have some tangential connection to religion and religious leadership. Not so much the Proud Boys, but the Oath Keepers sometimes invoke, that sort of language. But there really hasn't been much focus on the religious involvement in and the leverage of religion in January 6th. And Peter Manso and I guess our writer here have sort of been lonely voices on that. And I guess Jeff Charlotte to some extent too. Anyway, hundreds of highly politicized charismatic prophets confidently proclaimed during the 2020 election cycle that God had revealed to them that Donald Trump would be elected, as a handful had also done in the lead up to his election in 2016, right? And if you're wrong and he doesn't get elected, then you just say, well, that's the devil trying to fool everybody. We see the truth, but we're few in number, and the masses are blinded by Satan's powers of illusion. And what do you do with people who believe this stuff? A number of these prophets even showed up leading Christian prayer and worship in the crowd surrounding the Capitol on January 6th. Moreover, my research has uncovered evidence that some of these very same independent charismatic prophets and spiritual warfare leaders were taking meetings in the White House and apparently coordinating strategy with top Trump administration officials in the lead up to the riot. You might wonder how they were connected, and, maybe Roger Stone ends up being that link. We don't know yet. After January 6th, this prophecy-obsessed segment of Christianity did not go away. It was a prominent part of Doug Mastriano's coalition during his failed bid to become governor of Pennsylvania last fall, and they strongly backed Kari Lake in her bid to become Arizona governor as well. Rather than diminish in the intervening years, the movement's dynamics have become so extreme and so bound up with Donald Trump that even some concerned leaders within the independent charismatic world have started to throw red flags. But before I get to that, just keeping in mind who Mastriano was, and in particular what Kari Lake is about. And again, she's another one who continues to this day, a year later, to insist that she's the real governor and that, well, how can you explain the fact that the bulk of the world believes the opposite? Because they seem to have counted the number of votes and you didn't get more. Well, I did, but Satan is deceiving people into believing the exact opposite. And I'm compelled by God to continue to insist on the truth that I am the governor. But it's just, what if it's just delusion, like the most of us really believe? What if the delusion is that the idea that Satan is deluding everybody? Yeah, that could be it, right? Anyway, interestingly, we move on to this next subject here, that things have become so extreme and bound up with Donald Trump that even some concerned leaders within the independent charismatic world have started to throw red flags. One even compared contemporary politicized prophets to the Christians who used their theology to justify Nazism in Germany. The people that are committed to prophesying what they're prophesying are so ignorant of that Nazi precedent that they're rushing headlong into that very thing, said Bishop Mark Chirona in a podcast interview about prophecy and Christian nationalism. These types of concerns even led a group of 65 independent, charismatic leaders to issue a statement last year condemning the use of modern prophecy for partisan political ends. Yes, that used to be where evangelicals existed, right? They used to want to separate the two. The statement received several hundred further signatures from concerned charismatics. But wait a second, there's more. The few hundred dissenting believers do not wield the power and influence of the millions who still follow the prophets of MAGA. More than 2 years after January 6th, it is these same independent charismatic networks, same theologies, and same prophecies that Roger Stone is appealing to with his recurring declarations. When he testified to his prophetic destiny at Trump's Doral Resort, Stone was speaking at a joint event sponsored by a pair of charismatic-facing political organizations, the newly formed Pastors for Trump and the Reawaken America Tour. In case you've missed the Reawaken America Tour, it's a traveling roadshow of QAnon conspiracy theorists, COVID denialists, and charismatic pastors and prophets.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, and some more crazy to share with you. We stopped just short of when things turn truly disturbing in this story. Believe it or not, it gets worse. We were describing, or our writer was describing for us, the why and where Roger Stone was comparing himself or proclaiming himself the subject of a modern day prophecy about a stone that would kill a giant, and that he was that stone, Roger Stone. Speaking at Trump's Doral Resort to a joint event sponsored by a pair of charismatic-facing political organizations, the newly formed Pastors for Trump and the Reawaken America Tour, which he described as a traveling roadshow of QAnon conspiracy theorists, COVID denialists, and charismatic pastors and prophets. Now, one of its headliners is Trump's short-lived national security advisor, the notorious spy, Michael Flynn, now an arch-conspiracist. Another speaker at the event claimed, or appeared to claim, anyway, that we're heading for armed combat against evil mermaids. I had to read that carefully. That's what it says. Armed combat against evil mermaids. And you might wonder, what the effing F? Why would you say something as weird and stupid as that? And I don't know why, but I know that the answer is yes. There's a link here to some Rolling Stone coverage of it, but you may also have stumbled across coverage of it over at Daily Kos under the headline written, of course, by Hunter. Let's have the Space Force take out the mermaids. We have two related stories here. The what the hell are we going to do with the Space Force thing and the mermaids thing. And why not throw the two of them together? By the way, I want to note for the record that when I was at the Memorial Day service that our remaining scout was appearing at, or showing up, the Boy Scouts help manage and run the Memorial Day event in town, that Also present was the local church choir singing the anthems of the various branches of service. You know, they all have a song, and there's the Army song and the Navy one, and the Air Force and the Marines all have their song. And they even sang the Coast Guard anthem, which was a nice inclusion. Everybody sometimes leaves out the Coast Guard, and that's too bad. But I noticed they did leave out Space Force. The Merchant Marine didn't get anything either. I don't know if they're obviously not a branch of the military, but they're military adjacent in a way. They have an academy, the whole works. Anyway, so fine, leave them out of it. What about the Space Force? They have no academy, for one thing. And why don't they have their own anthem? Or maybe they do and nobody knows it yet. I just wanted to point out the fact that they get left out of these things. So yes, why not have the Space Force find a new mission in taking out the mermaids? Yeah, sure, mermaids are underwater, but does that really matter? No, I don't think so. There's not enough to do in space, so you might as well practice underwater as well, where, you know, there's a feeling of weightlessness. It might make a lot of sense. Why mermaids? I don't know, but I will note for the record, and I'll play for the record, the fact that there's an embedded video in Hunter's entry here, which is no doubt entertaining reading, from Patriot Takes, an embedded video in a tweet of Prophet Amanda Grace, who I believe we've probably heard that name before because it's just weird and sounds like the kind of person who would have said something weird and dumb that we'd have heard before. At Trump Doral, Prophet Amanda Grace warned of technologically advanced mermaids and water people spreading perversion and told the crowd, "We are meant for hand-to-hand combat." What? I don't know. I can't explain it either. But I can tell you this, there's a 40-second or so clip, and this might be one of those places where you just have to hear it to believe it. And I mean, you won't believe it anyway, but you might want to hear it anyway. Let me turn up the sound here and see if I can play this clip. Amanda Grace at Trump Doral, where Roger Stone was appearing and making the comments that sparked this Bulwark article. Ready for this?
There's wickedness attempting to completely cover this nation in perversion and seductive, seducing spirits. I have never seen more images of more mermaids and water people in my life.
She pauses here and brings the microphone down and looks around as though that's like a big applause line. Like, yeah, people are going to register. Yeah, they too will realize, oh my God, I also have seen just a vast proliferation of perverted mermaids all over America. I mean, there's the Little Mermaid story coming out, the movie. And I know that Trump types are angry about it because the mermaid isn't white enough for them. Because all mermaid, everyone knows about the racial composition of mermaids. I mean, they don't, but anyway, they're mad about that. So that might ring a bell for them. And then, to get mad because I've seen controversy about the Little Mermaid. Oh, the Little Mermaid, mermaids. Aha. And also probably it's like sort of a teenage type mermaid girl. I don't know how old mermaids get. I don't know how they age, but it's meant to be like this little teenage mermaid in a bikini top because, of course, it's a Disney movie. And although presumably mermaids swim around without clothes on, that's pretty perverted too. But even if they swim around with little bathing suits on, child grooming, yada, yada. I don't know. So this might ring crazy bells with these people, but I got to continue on. I note for the record that she has at this point, Amanda Grace sort of brought the microphone down and is looking at the crowd, gesturing as though she expects, a roar of approval or recognition of this weird thing that she seems to see. I've never seen more perverted mermaids and water people in my life. Well, how much do you really see, So any day you see a mermaid is probably more than usual.
That's a division in the kingdom of darkness, and they're highly technologically advanced. And we have to understand what we're dealing with.
Sure.
And we have to understand the rules of engagement in spiritual warfare.
Now, there aren't any, but this is bad. People are probably walking around sitting there going, mermaids, what the hell are you talking about? Well, we have to understand about spiritual warfare. Okay, I've heard of that. Let's have some of that. There's no applause or cheering going on. I think that's really wild.
And we are meant for hand-to-hand combat. And we are meant to bring our cries before the throne of God, to bring judgment on the rulers of darkness of this world and of this nation.
Sure, that sounds
because
familiar.
the rulers have set up a throne in this nation. They've set it up. Darkness has completely covered and eclipsed the White House of this nation.
So I figured that would probably be an applause line, but they cut off before there was any applause. Maybe there's more to it. I don't know, but that's where we are. Trump is hosting these things at his resorts, and of course, the guy that he chose as his national security advisor is totally into this. So I just kind of wanted to, mention that. And I'm curious about what, maybe you're curious too, and I can include a link here to Hunter's treatment of this and the Space Force stories. But first, I feel like I have to finish the Roger Stone thing for you. That's what's going on at this thing. Now, in his Jeremiah, is that how you pronounce this? Stone invokes a prophecy by the South African prophet Kim Clement, who died in 2016. I don't know whether he prophesied his own death or not, but at any rate, Clement is hardly a household name in broader American evangelicalism. But within the independent charismatic ecosystem, Clement is a modern-day prophet of global renown. His followers credit him with being one of the first of the charismatic prophets to, quote-unquote, predict Trump's election, which he did all the way back in 2007. Now, what he actually said was, Trump shall become a trumpet, which is really just a play on the word Trump and trumpet, but what does that mean? Well, that hardly seems like a precise foretelling, but rather a bit of figurative leeway, which is also a bit of figurative leeway is built into almost every prophetic word anyway. Independent charismatic leaders Matthew has interviewed, have pointed to Clement's prophecies about Trump as some of the most convincing proofs of God's anointing on the thrice-married, impious real estate mogul. Roger Stone clearly knows the power of these invocations and their importance for his new independent charismatic friends, and has latched on to, in a similarly elliptical Clement prophecy from 2014, about a, quote, simple stone that will be used to kill a giant, an obvious reprisal of the David and Goliath scenario, and claimed that the simple stone is himself. Well, if he wants to say he's simple, I guess that's his prerogative. I won't argue. Stone has made this claim before. I have found at least a dozen instances of him appearing on Christian nationalist and independent charismatic podcasts, live streams, and conferences since his apparent 2020 born-again experience. In many of these appearances, Stone uses almost identical phrasing, similar apocalyptic imagery, and similar appeals to the prophecies of Clement and other charismatic prophets. Michael Flynn, who like Roger Stone was raised Catholic, has also insinuated himself, particularly through the Reawaken America tour, into these same prophecy and charismatic celebrity networks, which contributed directly to the violence and chaos that threatened our democracy just a couple of years ago. So, what does it signal? That some of Donald Trump's closest and most strategically savvy allies and advisors, I would count Stone there, but not Flynn necessarily, but whatever, we'll throw him in too, who, as Stone makes clear, are not famous for their religiosity, are now, what does it signal? That they're now building credibility and influence within these extremist independent charismatic networks. Our writer here says, I think it shows a deep awareness within Trump's political operation that when it comes to the MAGA coalition, not all evangelicals are created equal, especially given the disloyalty he claims some have shown him by not endorsing his new presidential bid. Independent charismatics were the major driver of evangelical support for Trump in 2016, and charismatic prophets were a central validating and radicalizing force in the turbulent aftermath of the 2020 election. I wager that if or when we see another outbreak of semi-organized Christian political violence in the United States, it will originate in these militant prophecy-bolstered segments of evangelicalism, just as it did last time. Roger Stone and Michael Flynn seem to think so too, whether they genuinely believe it or not. They seem to believe that these people can be driven to perform the violence that they need in order to set these two up as power brokers again in America. So something to watch out for and worry about, yes, and also something that helps kind of, make sense of the senseless. Like, why is it that there are people who believe that Trump won despite all the evidence? Or why are there people who believe that Trump is a pious man of God despite all the evidence that he is the exact opposite of that? And I guess if you can answer that those things are all illusions produced by Satan for the purpose of confusing humans, then I guess you can believe anything and you go on from there. And it justifies anything you want if you believe in the mermaids. Why the Space Force isn't killing them? Well, I'm not really sure why that is. But if you are interested in that, let's have Hunter's view on this. This has got to be, I hope will lighten the mood after finding out just how super insane a certain segment of the population who surrounds Donald Trump actually is. A few weeks back, Hunter writes, we heard the unnerving news that America's newest military branch, the U.S. Space Force, was still struggling to define a mission for itself after 3 years of existence. This is generally not what anyone wants to hear from a group with large-scale military capabilities. When military generals start wondering what the scope of their own missions might be, they historically tend to conclude that their mission should involve a more proactive approach to blowing things up. Put more bluntly, the growing frustration of Space Force generals trying to imagine larger and better defined military roles for themselves is only going to lead to trouble, and we'd better come up with a midnight basketball program for troubled 3-star and 4-star generals real quick here if we want to avoid being cut off from our whole solar system due to sudden onset Kessler syndrome. That, then, is the newest possible existential crisis facing the country. It largely flew under the national radar, though, because a far more existential crisis cropped up at the same time. And when it comes to which of these existential crises is the newsier, more attention-grabbing version, there's simply no question. I am speaking, of course, of the coming mermaid wars. And then you heard Amanda Grace describe the inevitability of our war with perverted water people and mermaids. Rolling Stone gives us a brief transcription, and God bless him for it. I added the God, but that's it's just plain bless him, according to Hunter here, but force of habit throws that in there. I have never seen more images of mermaids and water people in my life. You've heard about that. You heard her say that, and they were technologically advanced, etc., etc. Well, this all came through in the audio that I played earlier. Before you scoff, know that Amanda Grace is a prophet, because she says so. And she and other pro-Trump religious, quote-unquote religious leaders had a whole lot more prophecies on hand, most of them revolving around Donald Trump acting as an instrument of God to smite conservatism's enemies, whether they be globalists or demons or mermaids. Grace cites God himself as the source of her evidence of highly technologically advanced water people. I saw The Abyss, so she's right about that. It's not like she's just linking to Wikipedia or Instagram for this one. God is giving the warning, right? And here's another embedded tweet here that says, Amanda Grace saying, we see seducing spirits through imagery in The Little Mermaid. I knew it was going to come down to The Little Mermaid. So, now we have two existential threats on our hands. The first is that the generals of the Space Force are growing irritable about the hazy goals of their mission. The second is that the highly advanced mermaids are coming to kick our, well, not kick really, because they're mermaids. They're coming to destroy us all, possibly through Met Gala fashion choices. Yes, possibly true. An unintelligent member of the public may only see two simultaneous crises. An intelligent person, however, is likely to see opportunity. Taken together, the two problems solve each other. If the Space Force needs a mission more engaging than their current one, whatever it is, all we need to do is task them with eliminating the mermaids. The plan is almost self-evident in its simplicity. We are dealing here with water people who are highly technologically advanced. There is no more advanced military force than the U.S. Space Force. A dullard might consider it the job of the Navy to wage war on water people, but that would literally be meeting the mermaids on their own turf. The Navy is the branch of our armed forces most in danger from a confrontation with the mermaids. Don't you see? The Air Force can simply fly over the mermaid armies, dropping bombs unimpeded and turning the ocean into an unpleasantly tinted mermaid stew. The Army and Marines, if faced with a mermaid attack, can simply walk a few hundred feet inland and pick off each flopping fish-tailed attacker as they try to heave themselves out of the surf. But the Space Force? The Space Force is best equipped of all to defend against the mermaid menace. The Space Force's primary assets are all in orbit, about as far from the mermaid danger zone as it's possible to get. And, to our knowledge, no matter how technologically advanced the hostile water people may currently be, there is no evidence that they have a presence in space. But that might just be Satan hiding that evidence, so watch out. That then can be the new Space Force mission to protect the United States from mermaids, technologically advanced or otherwise, to deprive them of any orbital presence which might threaten the country, to undertake worldwide satellite espionage looking and listening for mermaids so they can provide the earliest possible warning of real-life mermaid attacks. The Pentagon's annual budget is now in the neighborhood of $1 trillion per year. Spending $100 billion or so to fight off the mermaid menace would be a small price to pay to keep Space Force generals content and their fingers on buttons that target the mid-Atlantic rather than anything on dry land. It is impossible to come up with any argument against this plan. And furthermore, will allow the Space Force to credit itself with complete success, both now and for the foreseeable future. So long as the mermaids do not establish an orbital presence, Space Force generals can boast that they have a 100% mission success rate. As long as the mermaids confine their assaults to Met Gala fashion and the occasional children's movie, Space Force can brag that the nation remains safe. The biggest danger may instead be that Space Force gets too big for its camouflaged space britches and begins lording their mission success over the Navy, which has existed in this country since 1775, but apparently has failed to contain the mermaid menace, if Amanda Grace and her holy sources are to be believed. The resulting rivalry between the two military branches could get downright unpleasant at some future date, but that is for future America to worry about. Present-day America simply needs something for the Space Force to do. Something that will keep the generals off the streets and out of the pool halls. Oh, and we have to defeat the mermaids, of course. There is a real mission. This is a real mission, not something we just pulled out of a hat. Thank you very much. Good night and good luck in your mission. How about that? Well, now we know what the Space Force folks will be doing this weekend. At least we have that going for us, I suppose. All right, let's see. Other stories that we might be able to shoehorn in before departing for the weekend. Which among them might be the most helpful to you in, I don't know what, discussing the mermaid war, I suppose, this weekend? Let's see. Yeah. We know about Twitter sucking now. Oh, yeah, here's something. This is an interesting one. Well, gosh, there's a couple of them, but maybe we'll throw this one in from the Los Angeles Times. It's been a while since we talked about COVID and the horrible handling of COVID, and particularly the Trump-adjacent crowd's claims that the wrong people were put in charge of COVID and that they were, if they could turn back time and do it all over again, they would have put people who were murderously insane in charge. Well, what are we getting at here? The Los Angeles Times, Michael Hiltzik reporting here, his reporting. It's a column. It's an opinion piece, I guess, or an analysis. Did Sweden beat the pandemic by refusing to lock down? You remember when they advocated for that, and then they were going to be the Western nation that went the opposite direction, thinking that all of the conventional wisdom about how to combat the emergence of the virus was wrong? And the answer is no. Its record is disastrous. And we found that out kind of early, really, in the pandemic, as their infection rate, was actually not that much worse than other countries that took precautions, but its death rates were enormous compared to others, especially among seniors in Sweden. They really did. I mean, they tested the theory and then they reversed course because it was becoming obvious pretty quickly that they were really headed for disaster. But anyway, they also are a very different kind of country, and they didn't need for the bulk of the population to lock down in quite as radical a way as the rest of us, one, because of their population density, and two, because of the number of people that they had already working from home, generally speaking, or able to work remotely because of, they're highly technologically advanced, just like the mermaids. Well, anyway, let's get to the reporting here. They've held credentials from some of the world's most elite universities. Who are we talking about? We're actually talking about the people that, the crazy people who tried to take over COVID response here in the United States under Trump, that Trump supporters still believe should have been left in charge because they also wanted to take the Swedish approach. That's the connection going on here. Who are these people? Oh, right. They're the ones who held credentials from some of the world's most elite universities: Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, Oxford. They've been welcomed into the highest government policy councils. They became fixtures on television news shows and were quoted incessantly by some of the nation's leading newspapers. They're a cadre of academics and scientists who pushed a discredited solution to the COVID pandemic, shunning masks, school closings, even vaccines, all in the name of reaching the elusive goal of herd immunity. Remember that? Resulting in what may have been hundreds of thousands of unnecessary American deaths. There's over 1 million now, of course. That's the contention of "We Want Them Infected," a painstakingly documented new book by Jonathan Howard, a neurologist at New York University and a veteran debunker of the pseudoscience contaminating our efforts to fight the pandemic. So warning here to YouTube up front, he's going to be debunking a lot of this stuff. It's not pro-garbage, it's anti-garbage. All right? Don't ban this podcast as a result of reading about the debunking of bad COVID theories. In 2019, I guess a quote here from Jonathan Howard, "You would have been considered a quack if you suggested that the best way to get rid of a virus is to spread the virus. But that became mainstream and influenced politicians at the highest levels." Howard takes his title from Paul Alexander, an epidemiologist at the Health and Human Services Department during the Trump administration. In July of 2020, Alexander offered his view of how to exploit the relative risks of COVID to discrete populations to reach herd immunity. The idea was that so many people would eventually become naturally infected with the virus, and now we have, and therefore immune from further infection, that the virus would be unable to spread further. But of course, we've now realized there are people who've had COVID like 8 times. Infants, teens, kids, young people, young adults, middle-aged with no conditions, etc., have zero to little risk, he told top HHS officials. So we use them to develop herd. We want them infected. Alexander's proposal was essentially a screed against lockdowns. That suited the Trump White House, which was searching for ways around the economic dislocations caused by the virus, but he was wrong about the toll of sickness and death that would result, allowing the virus to rage among these ostensibly low-risk groups, and wrong about the prospects of reaching herd immunity naturally. We Want Them Infected may be the most appalling and infuriating book you'll read about America's response to the pandemic. It's also essential reading. I hope you'll read it because I probably won't, because I don't read anything except these articles. Believe it or not, you'd think I would spend more of my time reading, don't you think? But no, I hate it. Can't take it anymore by the end of the week. The book is populated by quacks, mountebanks, I've never seen that, and charlatans, Mountebanks, mountebanks, not backs. But I don't think I've ever run into that word. And not a few scholars with distinguished academic records, by the way, many of whom appear to have been seduced by the embrace of the right-wing echo chamber into promoting unproven and disproved policies. It's unbelievable that while doctors like myself were working to treat sick COVID patients, begging people to stay home and be safe, Howard told me there was another group of doctors working at cross currents to us, prominent doctors, wanting to purposely infect unvaccinated young people with the promise that herd immunity would arrive in a couple of months. They consistently minimized the gravity of the pandemic, but rarely, if ever, acknowledged that their optimistic forecasts of illness and death were consistently proven wrong. There are a number of problems with the herd immunity theory. One is that immunity from COVID infection tends to wane over time rather than become permanent. Also, infection with one variant of the virus does not necessarily confer immunity from other variants, of which there have been many. Yes, we now know that to be true. Another problem is that COVID can be a devastating disease for victims of any age. Allowing anyone to become infected can expose them to serious health problems. We now know that too. I also know that I'm way behind on starting the music. It's time for us to go ahead and do that. Moreover, the prospect of COVID could be defeated by the natural expansion of herd immunity persuaded many people not to bother with proven countermeasures, including social distancing, masking, or vaccination. Today, more than 3 years after COVID first appeared, the U.S. still has not achieved herd immunity, although it is nearing the goal, in the view of Robert Wachter, chair of the Department of Medicine at UC San Francisco. The disease's trajectory has been cataclysmic. The U.S. death toll stands at 1.13 million. Hundreds of children have died, and an estimated 245,000 children have lost one or both parents to COVID. The U.S. leads the world in COVID deaths. Its death rate of 3,478 per million population is worse than that of Britain, Spain, France, the Nordic countries, Canada, and Israel, though, as we know, Peru somehow stands at the top of that list. Some herd immunity advocates offered their blithe forecasts in a misguided, if not dishonest, attempt to provide comfort to the American public. Scott Atlas, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and Stanford University, urged HHS officials in March of 2020 to advocate against lockdowns on the grounds that they were inciting irrational fear of the virus, which he estimated would cause about 10,000 deaths. Not a million, huh? The panic needs to be stopped. Actually, Atlas
From
needed to be stopped.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, we end things there. We have to leave things there because it's Friday and it's time to go. Time to hand things over now to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's he got on tap? Let's see. The GOP political strategy based on getting likes is disconnected from the country. We already knew that. Plus lots more from around the country and around the world. As usual, do stay tuned. We'll see you next week.